Unbroken, healing through storytelling.
My guest today is Mark Deeks. Mark is an online piano coach, a best-selling author, and helping use music to improve mental health for 25 years. He has spent more than 20 years working as a musical director, pianist, arranger, and teacher, and has built a really diverse group of musicians as a client base, from artists such as Faye Tozer of Steps to black metal bands Winterfilleth, a band Mark ended up joining, and Drucht. He has given Lenny Henry piano lessons and written versions of songs by metal star Sonata Arctica for symphony, orchestra, and choir. Mark's extensive work as a musical director has included everything from choirs for the BBC, Magic Radio, and his own Sing United to music theatre such as shows as West Side Story and The Sound of Music. He has conducted the Royal Northern Sinfonia and written string parts for Japanese post-rock legends Mono. He has previous clients around the world, including France, Canada, Finland, and Holland, and has even co-written and toured a comedy music with the BBC's Alfie Joey. So welcome to the show, Mark. How are you doing? Lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much, Madeleine. I appreciate it. When people read it out, I sit here and feel a little embarrassed, but no, it's pretty cool hearing it listed. Thank you.
It's brilliant. And you've also worked with Gareth Malone, which I discovered on your website, which people will know as the famous conductor and all the programs he does. So because my show is called Unbroken, the very first question I ask everybody is, what does that word unbroken mean to you?
I was thinking about this when I was just running before filming this podcast, and thinking about our ability to find resolve in the face of adversity, and in whatever form that might come. And I think it's important that, in simplistic terms, people sort of tell each other, well, just keep putting one foot forward. But it really is that. What is the alternative? So rather than necessarily define unbroken, I think, what is the alternative? It's to be broken. Well, that doesn't sound something like I want to accept. I can feel it, but I need to keep moving forward. So putting one foot forward is certainly a mantra that I think we can all continue to live by, no matter how simplistic that might sound.
It is a wonderful mantra, but it's also a choice, though, isn't it? Because you could choose not to take one step forward, but you chose to take one step forward. So that is you building your resilience, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a choice that comes easily, and it's not a choice that you necessarily win every day. But you have to have that as the overarching, the guide. That needs to be the direction, even if sometimes you need to take a breath. Yeah. Overall, we go forward.
Absolutely. So we did read out your bio, which is full of all these wonderful musical accomplishments, but we're not here to talk about your music career, because it was about a week before lockdown, you and your wife experienced a huge loss, didn't you? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a week before the first UK lockdown, my wife was 22 weeks pregnant, and we had the previous week been at the 20-week scan, and we were halfway through the 20-week scan. And for those of you who've had children know that's a pretty key area that you're entering at that stage. It's the stage that you can find out the gender if you want, and we decided we didn't want to. And we were halfway through the 20-week scan and all of the previous scans, and everything had been absolutely perfect. I mean, they were using the words perfect and amazing and wow, look at that, and telling us how amazing the heart was and the brain, and everything was perfect. And then the sonographer went a little bit quiet, and that quiet went on a little bit too long, and then we found out that there was a problem. And long story short, we found out that what we were told that we really needed to know was our daughter had two significant issues, both of which were almost certainly fatal, in terms of probably, almost certainly not even going full term. And if she did, almost certainly not surviving. And if she did, almost certainly for only a very, very short period of time. And if she did, almost certainly not in a great way. So there was a whole series of, this is not a good idea. But we quickly learned that in such a scenario, it's still the parent's choice. We can legally say that we want to continue with the pregnancy. And what we found was that was really challenging because we found that this was now known as what's called a termination for medical reasons, or TFMR, which was obviously a term that we'd never heard about. We neither of us have children. And suddenly we were faced with literally a life-defining decision, and it needed to be made now. So we were faced with a very, very difficult decision that we realized as the days and months and now over a year later have gone on, that comes loaded with a whole load of guilt, because whilst people hear the phrase baby loss, there's actually some quite distinct strands within that, because people,
they kind of lump all baby loss together, really, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, things like miscarriage and stillbirth are equally tragic. The end result is equally tragic. This isn't any kind of competition. But the way that people understand those things is that that's something that's happened to the lady, or to the couple. That there's not been anything that they have done to cause the end result. But in a TFMR scenario, you are being asked to take a decision based on medical information. And that's quite a distinct distinction that we've kind of wrestled with, and we've since discovered that we're very much not alone. But it's not a scenario that's really talked about, which is why I talk about it now.
Yeah, it's quite hard to get my head around. So they're saying there's no way that Laurie, your baby, would have survived even term, let alone pregnancy, giving birth, but they still put the decision down to the parents.
Yes, and that's something that's really only sort of dawned on us recently, that if you had an adult who had been terminally diagnosed by the medical profession, said, based on everything we know of the medical profession and our skills, this is your scenario, there is no more that can be done for you, then the patient isn't asked to sign a piece of paper to say, yes, that's okay. But in a baby loss situation, this is the situation. The doctor's word is not final in baby loss. If the couple say, no, we wish to proceed, then the medical profession need to roll with that, much as they can be advising you against that. So we could have decided to, hope for the best. We could have decided to, perhaps if we'd had some kind of religious views, perhaps that termination was not an acceptable answer to us, we could have said no, and we would have had to roll with the consequences. But there's a very, very different way that terminally ill patients who are adults are treated to babies and their parents in that scenario.
Well, it's just the most awful situation to be in. How contrastingly different just at your 20-week scan to how it had been, and to hear that news and to have that decision to make, and your first pregnancy. It's just, when you hear all of it, it's just, it's heartbreaking, Mark, for both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I think stung my wife, Angela, more than anything was not having the moment where someone says, congratulations, it's a girl.
Yeah.
We didn't have that. We need to tell you the gender because we think it's important in what we need to tell you. That's what they said to us.
Well, when we are, expecting a baby, I'm a mum of 3, we have this image in our mind, holding that baby at the end of this pregnancy, and that image, that dream, it didn't go anywhere as you planned. You could never have planned for your baby to be diagnosed with not 1 but 2 very, very rare conditions.
That's right. And, my wife was on the bed in a not flattering position, and we were being told we needed to be told the gender in order to deal with the scenario that was unfolding. And so we never got a congratulations, it's a girl. We got it's a girl, but.
And the word, you struggle with that word termination, really, don't you?
Yeah, really. I think that is the fundamental problem of it, because it's loaded with so many connotations that we think of, abortion and termination as being these very taboo words that people don't like to speak about because they tend to have very, very distinct, strong views on, and understandably so. And so the problem is that because they are loaded with this idea that, you are doing something, and some people will perceive that as being a bad thing in certain scenarios. I think in this scenario, suggesting that the parents didn't want their child is really unhelpful and totally unnecessary. I understand that in the nuance of the lexicon, that is exactly what is happening. But let's call it something else, because it's serving nobody to use that word.
And do you have a word in mind that you think it could be replaced with?
No, I don't, and I'm sorry that I don't have a solution, but I can certainly say that, for medical reasons is fine.
Impossible decision, I think, would be,
Yeah,
or heartbreaking decision, I think, would be, in my mind,
yeah,
is what pops up. It's also really like the word miscarriage, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Women have such a guilt-ridden roller coaster to ride, even when things go well. But certainly when things go wrong, the wondering and the did I do that? My wife still wonders if she had too much caffeine or something, which she didn't. I mean, she went to decaf tea immediately, but those first few weeks when she didn't know she was pregnant, she was still drinking caffeinated tea. I mean, she's still persecuting herself over that. So it's really
that's
difficult.
really hard to hear, isn't it? The guilt. I imagine you both have your own different types of guilt, but to hear the guilt that Angela puts herself through, that if I didn't drink coffee, the baby would be here, but it was a very, very rare condition, and
Yeah, absolutely.
you've been told genetically it was just really bad luck, or it wasn't.
Yeah, literally. So we had, I mean, one of the weird things about the scenario that when we were being told what was happening is that you have to make a series of decisions very, very quickly, like types of post-mortem. What kind of service do you want? So it's just like a checklist of decisions you're being asked to make. And well, just give us a minute, kind of thing. And so yeah, they did we asked for the full package for whatever it was called of post-mortem, because we needed to know what the genetic situation was.
Yeah.
And we were told as the result of that, which took about 10 or 11 weeks through no fault of COVID, through fault of COVID, that it was purely the die was cast. It was bad luck. There is nothing anyone could have done. Nothing had been to blame. Your odds are no worse the second time than they were the first time. Everybody has those odds. You just had odds of one in however many. And the
Millions,
doctor,
I would imagine.
yeah, I'm sure the consultant said that he sees one of those two conditions 2 or 3 times a year, but never at the same time as another condition. In 30 years has he seen that occur.
I guess the only good thing is it's quite reassuring to know that next time it is not guaranteed that this will happen again. If there will be a next time, I'm sorry, I shouldn't assume that there will be a next time.
That's fine. It's fine. There's I've got some friends who have had a scenario where a medical condition has arrived in their boy, where it is literally sort of 1 in 4 that it would happen again. So thankfully we don't have any kind of mathematical odds put on us. It's literally you have no worse or better chance than anyone at the stage of any pregnancy of that happening. It's just what happened, and yet it's comforting, but doesn't really feel like a very secure thing to go forward with. But yeah, it's a whole bundle of emotions.
Yeah, I would imagine. So Angela had to have an operation to end the pregnancy. And what happened when you left hospital, or when you were on a ward? Did they give you a private room, or were you just put in with other women in various stages of labour or baby loss? Or
yeah, it's difficult. So there is a ward that specialises in those kind of treatments or areas of care, and the staff were fantastic. And yes, we did have a private room. I think the bit that was the hardest, or one of the hardest, was that we had to go the night before for Angela to be prepared. So we kind of very much knew it was coming. It was about 6 or 7 days from when we found there was a problem to that having to happen. But when Angela was taken down for surgery, I mean, she could still feel Laurie kicking, and that's a fairly brutal thing to be dealing with for both of us, because they asked if I wanted to walk down with her as she was wheeled down, which I did, of course. And it's a huge hospital, the Royal Victoria Infirmary, the RVI in Newcastle, and it involved corridors and a lift to a different floor and round corners and so on. And when it came time to say goodbye, and they said, we're at the surgery, you need to say goodbye, they all went in, the porter, the nurse, Angela on the bed, and I was left on my own. And this is not at all to say that I was in a worse scenario than Angela whatsoever. But I said to them afterwards, I was bawling my eyes out in a corridor where I had no idea where I was, because I wasn't paying attention to how I got there, clearly. And I didn't know how to get back to the ward. Yeah. And had there been a nurse who went, right, so if you just wait there, I'll come and get you or something.
Yes, I'll take you back up to a room to wait in or something.
But I mean, I understood, rightly so, that the lady is the centre of attention, and I get that. But I've started to speak out a little bit about how men are sometimes not necessarily spoken about in this in this field, and that's really not me saying woe is me whatsoever. But I think we need, if we're going to improve things, we need to talk about them.
Well, yes, as women, obviously, we can grow our babies and, birth them, but you're still both parents of this
Yeah,
child.
absolutely.
You make this baby together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the saddest things was, mention about sort of seeing other ladies in various stages of, successful pregnancies. We had to go and stand in the waiting room whilst they tried to get us an appointment when we just found out the news. We could have done without that. It was standing surrounded by ladies going in for their scans. And we were, 20 minutes having just found out we were losing Laurie. When we left the ward after the surgery, we had to walk through the maternity ward to get out. We could have done without that. So, I mean, it seems, I've since spoken to a couple who had this experience 18 years ago, and they're sort of really disheartened that not much has changed. They said they were greeted at the door thinking that they were in labour, sort of excitedly. So it's just a shame that this kind of stuff is not, what seems on the surface to be simple things to change has not necessarily moved forward as it could have done.
It's really hard and heartbreaking to hear that it's all just mixed in together, and also no understanding of what you're going through, or no compassion for the immense amount of so many feelings you both must be feeling when you've come to say goodbye to your baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, the staff were fantastic. I mean, the care in a lot of ways was absolutely tremendous. I think that one of the things that struck us afterwards is that we were immediately put in contact with like a charity and organisation that helps grieving parents. And that was really appreciated. But we quickly clocked that this was an umbrella organisation for people who've lost babies in all scenarios. Well, that's great, and they're doing fantastic work. But where is the discussion about TFMR? The discussion isn't there. And in fact, it was about 9 months before we even found a specifically TFMR group, and on Instagram of all places, that my wife stumbled upon them. And they obviously have a much more nuanced understanding of the sort of emotions that go with it. But interestingly, their main one was called TFMR Mamas.
Yes, excluding the dadders again.
Yeah. So they've just literally in this last week or so, Andrew sent me a link that they're starting a group called TFMR Papas.
Okay.
But
no mamas and papas.
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, perhaps that's important that we have, I don't know, a separate group for people to feel comfortable with it. But the hospital didn't know. The hospital didn't know that this group existed.
And that's quite concerning, really, isn't it? Was it important for you to join a group just with other parents that had to terminate for medical reasons?
So at first, it had never crossed our minds, because of course things were going pretty fast, that this was important to us. And at first, the fact that we weren't being put in contact with baby loss organisations was fantastic. We had no complaints. But it was only when a steady stream of people, either that we knew or didn't know, told us about how they understood and they knew what it was like. But when you found out they'd had a miscarriage at 6 weeks, which of course the end result is equally as tragic. And as I always pains to say, this is not grief top trumps.
No, it's not pain Olympics, really, is it?
Absolutely not pain Olympics, yeah.
Yeah.
But people, I don't think, understand quite the nuance of what comes with a TFMR unless you've been through it.
Well, I know the excitement at around 15, 16 weeks when you think it's a little butterfly in your tummy, and then you start to think, no, that's actually a movement, and my baby's growing, and I'm nurturing it, and then you start to feel it kicking. To me, that's when you think, okay, I really am pregnant. I really am growing a child inside of me. My tummy's beginning to pop out. Yeah, it's just heartbreaking. I really struggled to become pregnant, so it took me a good few years to get pregnant. So once I was pregnant, it was fantastic, and then to be told that actually, no, this baby was never destined to survive. It's heartbreaking. And so then we go into lockdown, and how did you both cope with lockdown? Because Angela worked as a massage therapist, didn't she? So she could no longer work.
Yeah, so she at the time was a part-time sports massage therapist and a part-time teaching, part-time doing supply teaching. Neither of which, of course, she could do at all. Yeah. So now she was, and of course now she couldn't see her parents who only live on the other side of the estate, and so she was now very much rattling around the house, and I felt responsible to continue to bring in the income, and whilst a lot of what I do in terms of live performances and conducting and rehearsing my choir and so on had to change or stopped, there was quite a significant amount of income disappeared in 24 hours. A lot of what I do can be done online. I do online piano coaching anyway. I was doing that before COVID, thankfully. So that, in fact, exploded.
You were one of the smart ones.
Well, maybe
who knew about online working.
Yeah, I didn't see a pandemic coming though. But
No.
so my online piano coaching actually exploded. I was tripled up, quadrupled in about a month. So that was great, but it meant I was extremely busy, and I could and have continued to do so for the last year, run my choirs online, because I thought it was important. I thought I had a duty to, people who do amateur musical hobbies like that, it's very much passion based. It's very much social. It's like not a crutch, that's too strong a word, but it plays a significant part in these people's lives.
Therapeutic as well, isn't it? To
absolutely.
sing your heart out. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I felt that there was a responsibility to keep this going, because so much stuff was shutting down. And frankly, there were a lot of other choirs just shutting down, saying, we'll see you when this is over. So I was like, now, apart from everything else, of course, the singers pay me a subscription to how I make a living. But I thought, there was no reason that we should just stop. Didn't seem the right thing to do. But at first, having to adapt rehearsing 150 people online, many of whom have never been on a Zoom call in their lives, didn't know what Zoom was. That took some effort. So everything for the first few months was just really time consuming, to try and think of creative solutions to problems all the time, which I don't mind doing, because I kind of thrive in that kind of scenario. But it meant that I was just really, really, really busy trying to make everything work and make sure there was enough money coming in. And meanwhile, Angela, bless her sole task for the day was to walk the dog.
Well, I'm hearing
walk the dog.
Yeah, I'm hearing that one of you is rattling around the house, and another one of you has the potential to burn out because you've overwhelmed yourself. So what did that piling of plates, juggling them all in the air, what did that do to you?
I thought I was fine. as you might imagine, people say. I thought I was fine, and I'd never really had any discernible mental health problems that I was aware of. I think in the last few years, I would occasionally have a day or two, maybe, where I sort of feel a bit low, didn't really know why, didn't really have any concrete reason. I just didn't really care so much every now and then. But I had no really discernible issues that were concerning. But as 2020 went on, then these days started to get a bit more frequent. And obviously I knew, the world was experiencing a mass trauma. We were experiencing a deeply personal trauma. And I knew that Angela was really, really struggling, so it was all I could do to try and keep her going. And she was walking and running miles and miles and miles and miles, and getting out with the dog and just disappearing for a couple of hours because, we're lucky we live near countryside and the beach. And so I knew that was good for her. But it wasn't really until towards the end of 2020 that my struggles were starting to get more frequent. And they started to manifest themselves. I didn't know what was going on at first, but I've since concluded that I was having panic attacks. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know why. I mean, obviously I knew I'd been through a trauma, but when they started to happen, at that precise moment, nothing bad was happening. I could be out on a sunny day walking the dog. I could be watching the telly, I could be watching football. And suddenly I would feel really on edge and panicking, and I didn't know why. And I felt very much a sort of fight or flight kind of feeling. And so if we're out walking the dog, I was like, I need to get home like now, start walking faster. It was awful. And it would sort of pass. And sometimes it would pass after 20 minutes, half an hour. Sometimes it would go on a bit longer. And I started to feel really nauseous. Like that was the physical manifestation. I would feel really nauseous and sick and panicky. And I hate feeling sick. I've always had a really sensitive stomach. So if I feel sick, I'm really worried until it goes away. So that in itself was kind of like feeding into the panic. So they started to get more frequent. And then New Year's Eve was not pretty. Angela got some drinks in and we're going to make the best of it. We can't go out, but, let's have a night of it. And I was shaking like a leaf in bed by 9 o'clock. I just wanted it to stop. I felt awful, really, really poorly on New Year's Eve. And so I had to sort of hold my hand up and say, yeah, this isn't great. We need to do something about it.
So up until that point, you hadn't told her that you were struggling or having panic attacks?
Oh, yeah, no, yes. I told her, Angela, we would tell each other everything. but I didn't really know what it was until it started to get a bit more frequent. Like I just feel panicky. Like I kept describing it like, what is the matter with it? I don't know why I'm panicked.
Well, to me, you say a trauma, but it's grief as well, and grief manifests itself in so many ways. And I think the panic attacks is when we feel out of control, and you two were just so out of control of this situation. There's nothing that you could have done. No amount of not drinking caffeine or doing anything differently would have changed the end result, really. And that's hard
Well, it's
to
funny.
really accept.
Funny you should say that, Madeleine. Funny you should say that. In the last couple of months, I've changed to decaffeinated coffee. I never, ever, ever, because coffee I've always loved. I'm a big coffee fan. I've always said, I'm not a huge drinker, although I do like a drink. Never smoked, never taken drugs, but I do really like coffee. I just like the taste of coffee. And so I have historically drank quite a lot of coffee, particularly sort of working at home. It's just really easy. And in the last couple of months, I cut out caffeine.
Yeah.
Very strange difference. I would never have believed it.
Yeah.
And I'm drinking decaffeinated coffee now because
For panic attacks, it would definitely make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. They haven't stopped, but within a couple of days, I thought this really feels like it's just taken the edge off.
So how do you cope now? What has helped you to kind of, I guess, ground yourself, center yourself when you're having a panic attack? Because that's really, to me, the essence of being aware and then doing something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I contacted my GP after the New Year's Eve incident, and they of course wanted to put me on 6 months of medication instantly. I wasn't necessarily very keen on that prospect. It sounded like a long time, and whilst I'm not too proud to ask for help, that sounded like a bit too much of a response. But I couldn't deny that I needed to do something, so I agreed to go on them, but with the sort of agreement that I would sort of review it. I didn't want to be on 6 months if I didn't want to. So I ended up taking them for 2 months and said, no, I'm not crazy. I had one or two little side effects I wasn't keen on and didn't really feel like me. And I thought, I feel like I can do this without. So I sort of agreed to sort of come off them. And the panic attacks hadn't like completely stopped, but they have definitely started to, I don't think, touch wood now, maybe like 5 weeks since I had a bit, and even then it was nothing like New Year's Eve. So I'm just really aware of my breathing. Yes. It sounds very simple, but it really is true. I guess
it's so powerful. So and we always have our breath. We don't need to reach for an app or reach for something or go for a walk if it's raining. We always have our breath, and it
precisely
totally can center us and ground us, which is really, I think, the trick. Even just simple 4, 7, 8. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, let it out for 8, and just focusing on your breath can just calm your nervous system.
Yeah, I've literally found that all I need to do is slow my breathing, and I can just sit for a couple of minutes and just make myself take a slow inhale as I can and a slow exhale as I can, and it makes a huge difference. It's as I say, it's not stopping necessarily the panic starting, but the effect is definitely reduced. I cannot believe how much decaffeinated coffee has taken the edge off, and it's not perfect. It's a constant every day. Let's just check in at how we're doing, kind of thing. But still,
but that's good that you have that awareness to check in, to listen to your body. Where am I at today? Practicing self-care is so important, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you started using this new social media platform called Clubhouse. For people that don't know about Clubhouse, it's just audio only, so you don't need to worry about a Zoom camera, what you look like. You can be in your joggies, and it's just voices, and there's different rooms. And you started to speak out about mental health, how it impacts men, didn't you?
I did, yeah. And what's strange is I started to notice people talking about Clubhouse on like Facebook and everything. I didn't know what it was because I tend not to pay much notice to trends and stuff, and I tend to be the kind of person who goes, "Oh, yeah, well, I don't need that. I don't like trends." So, I don't want to just jump on a trend because it's a trend.
Yes.
And eventually, one or two people sort of said, "No, Mark, I think you'd like this. You really need to give it a go."
Unbroken,
so I kind of,
healing
got an
through
account
storytelling.
And looked at it and thought the user interface was awful. Just didn't really understand what was going on at all. I thought, "No, this isn't for me." And when people sort of explained the concept to me, it sounded like everything I would dislike. Because I find small talk really, really difficult. I'm quite socially awkward like that. Put me in a group at a party, and I'm the person waiting to go home, I find that kind of interaction very, very difficult. One-to-one conversation with a purpose is easy. So I don't have a problem doing this. But a social group of people who are just chit-chatting really puts me on edge. I don't like it. So the notion that I was going to do this with people around the world on my phone did not sound great. But I sort of sniffed around a bit and sort of dipped into a few rooms and started to just get up and speak. And I think I found a couple of mental health rooms, one or two of the first rooms I found, and sort of just shared a bit, because it was around the time that we decided we kind of hadn't really told our friends about TFMR at all. And so obviously people knew we'd lost Laurie. People knew that something had gone wrong, but we'd never really shared publicly that it had been a TFMR, because we were worried that how people would perceive that. But around 10 or 11 months after it happened was around the time that I started to, Clubhouse came on the radar, and we just decided as a couple that we didn't care. Like this, we did nothing wrong. It's the terminology that's not helping. The stigma is just not fair on the couple, and we're going to go stir crazy if we don't talk about it and just openly say, this is what happened. We regret nothing. We did nothing wrong. It just wasn't meant to be. And that decision as a couple came around the time as I started speaking on Clubhouse. And as I started to speak about it a bit more, it got a little bit easier. And then I realized that, people don't talk about this. Where are the other people talking about this? And where are the men talking about this? Because, as you say, there's two people involved.
And what was the impact of speaking out?
It really helped me. It really helped me. It's not like I was necessarily, I wasn't like sort of, I wasn't crying on the platform. I wasn't like trying to sort of have a therapy session. I was just telling my story, and I told it again, and I told it again. And the more that I told it, and the more people responded and said, oh, thank you for speaking out about this. We don't hear people, this is never spoken about. Men don't speak about it at all. This is a really taboo subject. Thank you for sharing that. And people started to ask me to go on podcasts or guest in Facebook groups or be guest in other Clubhouse rooms. Say, can you just share your story? Because we think this is an important subject to speak about. And that, that we're human. That gives you a bit of confidence, and you think that you're on the right path. And you're not only are you doing yourself good, but you're helping others.
It's a real, I guess, kind of paradox that it's great that they're listening to you speaking out, but you think, well, why don't men speak out? That's hard. But so it is brilliant that you can do this, but I really hope it does encourage other men to hear that it's really okay to admit that you're struggling or that things are tough. But I think listening to you, it will give them some hope. So thank you for that.
I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah. So just before we do kind of sign off, are there any tips that you would, impart to my listeners just before we say goodbye?
I think that one of my mantras is that we've started to use music too passively in society. I'm as guilty as anyone of putting a music playlist on in the background whilst doing 17 other things. But sometimes it's good to go back to what listening to music often used to be like for people. Families used to gather around and wonder at radios and record players producing this sound. Where's that? Are the people in the box? Sound is coming out. And they would gather and look at the box and just listen to the music. And of course, when vinyl came out, you see, I'm a big vinyl collector.
Yes.
They look at the artwork, study the lyrics, look at the credits, and just immerse themselves in the experience. Because music, when we allow music to do that, to have that kind of active involvement in our lives, reminds us of people and places and times and stories and celebrations and events in our lives that in a way that nothing else can. It's human reaction to music. And when we remind ourselves of music in that way, then it does us good. And so I say to people, listen to music, one song a day. And once you just let your mind wander, you approach it in a mindful way, in the same kind of way we talk about meditation and yoga and breathing exercise. Approach music in that. Listen to one song. See what it reminds you of, or who it reminds you of, or where it reminds you of, or when it reminds you of, and tell someone about it. And if you want to really go to town, take up a musical hobby, because I guarantee you, taking up a musical hobby, I coach people to play the piano, and I tell them to do it for 10 or 15 minutes a day. I don't want you to do anything else. Approach it in the same way you would approach any other element of your well-being routine. I guarantee that when you're actively trying to work out which finger goes where on a piano, you are not worrying about anything else.
Because then you're in that moment, really, aren't you? And that's all you can focus on. It reminds me of one of my guests from early on called Tasha Shu, who at 16 had a theatre accident. She fell through a trapdoor and plunged and broke her neck and is now paralyzed from the neck down. But she's amazing. And she said she listened to uplifting music all the time, and music was her therapy. And
Absolutely.
I totally agree. You know, we've had to dance a lot in this house in lockdown, listening to music. It's got us through. Thank goodness for music, hey?
Absolutely. And it's so easy to access.
It's so easy, too easy. So what would you say the biggest learning out of all of this has been for you?
Wow. I think someone said to me, you know, Laurie has come to teach you and Angela something.
And do you believe that as well?
Yeah, I think we're clearly we're different people because of what we've been through, and I think that it's taught us how resilient we can be. I think it's taught us how well we always knew we were as strong as a couple. We've never had any difficulties in that department, and we are even stronger than we were. And I think it's taught us that. I think the irony wasn't lost on me that I teach people to use music to improve their mental health, and then here I was having my own mental health problems. And so I kind of had to really go back to basics with myself, and I think it's given me an extra layer of understanding as to what I can give people with the music work that I do, and I feel like I've got just a little extra perspective on that now, and so yeah, I think it's put a bit of extra fire in my belly. So I've decided right now, I just decided this the other day, I'm going to help 1 million people access piano playing before I'm done.
That is fantastic. What an amazing dream to have, to help 1 million people with piano playing. I might even be one of them. You never know. Something I've wanted to do.
Absolutely. I started teaching piano when I was 15, so I need to try and find a way to work out how many I've already done.
There's an experiment for you. Well, Mark, it just leads me to really thank you for coming on the show, for being so honest and real with what you've both been through. And I just wish you both all the best for the future.
Thank you very much. It's really appreciated. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Unbroken, healing through storytelling.